Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Plenty to get to. Let me start with this just very quickly. Again, given the happenings here in the town where I live with the local school district, I wanted to provide a brief update, although it's going to be vague, only because we're keeping a great deal close to the vest here for a variety of reasons, of which you might expect. I will say this. Things are, first of all, moving in the right direction, which is excellent. Second of all, and very predictably, the school district continues to do what they do best, which is be completely stupid and behave in such a way that clearly implies guilt. That's my opinion, but that's what they're doing. They're engaging in retaliation also against other staff members. They are doing whatever they can do to muscle people around. And again, this is what a criminal organization does. This is how they operate. So they're getting caught. As they continue to do these kinds of things and as they continue to whine and scream and everything else, all they're doing is just exposing themselves even more in the entire process. And like I've said in the past, if you want to see evil people, and you want to see, again, how they behave and what they do, look at what they fail to take responsibility for. Look at how, again, they immediately divert attention or attempt to, but again, at the exact same time, they have no choice but to just flail about and yell and scream and shout and attack individuals. Because, again, if they were not guilty of anything, they would accept responsibility. They would say, we didn't know about any of this. They would come out and make those statements. They haven't done that, not to my knowledge anyway. And all they're doing is just getting angry. Well, as it turns out, again, if anger is the emotion that you have when something is exposed within your district, then that's the wrong emotion if you're innocent. If you're an innocent person in any of this, anger is not the emotion that you should have. You should be, again, clear-headed, wide-eyed, with a straight back, and openly say again, we had nothing to do with this. We can prove that we had nothing to do with this. And we expect to do so certainly now and in the future, but that's not what they're doing. They're doing exactly what a guilty party does. They're behaving in all of the ways that a guilty party does. So, again, they would use the law as their excuse, and like I said, excuses are exactly all that they have right now. That's not a good look. That's not building trust with anybody. In fact, it's eroding it. So this is going to continue to take place. I'll continue to update people again as certain things come to light here. There has been a great deal that already has. As I said previously, there's no way that there's just one victim. I know that there are at least more. I'll just put it that way, that have exhibited very similar behaviors, certainly around the same timeline that has been in question here, along with a number of other moves, certainly from an employment standpoint among former employees that also occurred during and around this very time. There are no coincidences, is essentially what I'm saying. There just aren't any. They don't exist. So the ball moves forward here, and it's not looking good for the district. There's no doubt about that one. So I'm going to leave it there for now, but let me get into some geopolitical things here. First of all, I believe as I'm recording this right now, Donald Trump is making some kind of a deal, a trade deal allegedly with the UK. We'll see how that pans out. I have no doubt that he's in full control of that entire situation, so that should be interesting. There is this, however. The business of him mentioning Alcatraz is very interesting. As it turns out, Alcatraz was actually being refurbished and renovated during Biden's administration. I came across this article from Tudor Perini, if I'm saying that right, an investor website here, and it says the following. It says, Perini Management Services awarded $48.6 million Alcatraz Island Historic Structures Stabilization and Rehabilitation Project. This article was put together on July 9th of last year, 2024. It says Framingham, Massachusetts, via Business Wire apparently. It says Tudor Perini Corporation through the New York Stock Exchange, the company, quote unquote. It says a leading civil building and specialty construction company announced today that its subsidiary, Perini Management Services Inc., has been awarded a contract valued at approximately $48.6 million by the National Park Service for the Alcatraz Island Historic Structures Stabilization and Rehabilitation Project. Located in the San Francisco Bay, the project will address deterioration and structural deficiencies associated with the Alcatraz main prison building, which includes both interior and exterior work. The scope of work includes abatement of hazardous materials in the exterior walls and interior construction areas, repair of concrete spalls. It says replacement of deteriorated steel reinforcements, strengthening of unreinforced concrete foundation walls, repair and stabilization of exterior windows, and installation of storm windows. The project will provide a safe facility for the $1.4 million annual visitors and staff, it says, by increasing the building's ability to resist seismic forces and revolving aging and weather-related impacts to the exterior walls. Work is expected to begin this month with substantial completion anticipated for the summer of 2027. The contract value was added to the company's backlog in the second quarter of 2024. It's too funny. I mean, the simple fact that he would bring this up, and then, of course, people in the media are saying things like, well, who's going to pay for that? As it turns out, it was an investment project that happened on Joe Biden's watch, allegedly. So this is very funny. Again, he doesn't bring these things up by accident. He always brings them up on purpose because he has plans for these particular things, and he's moving things in a particular direction. So again, it was much like when he was sitting down this week with the Prime Minister of Canada, and he keeps bringing up Canada as being the 51st state. And then the Canadian Prime Minister, again, who probably won the position via voter fraud, and certainly was pictured with Ghislaine Maxwell, among other individuals back in the day, he openly steps forward and says, well, that'll never happen. I firmly believe that we will not become the 51st state. And Trump just sits there and goes, we'll see. And he just continuously eggs him on. I absolutely love it. Again, there are moves being made here behind the scenes that, we're not going to be privy to. There's no doubt about that one. But we don't have to know everything, but we have to learn to read between the lines. And that is certainly happening, I think, also. Okay, let me mention this as well. This is from Breitbart. Again, here in Ohio, we have a serious election problem, certainly with regard to who's going to be the next governor and why. Again, I think, well, as I've been over before, Vivek Ramaswamy belongs in jail for what he has done. But theoretically, everybody belongs in jail who's running for what they did also. Mike DeWine belongs in jail for endless reasons. Certainly Ukrainian connections, among other things. Then you have Dave Yost, of course, who is the Attorney General of the state, and he was the Attorney General during the entire COVID lie. So I didn't hear Dave Yost bring anything up back in the day about saying no to Governor DeWine. He apparently never looked at anybody and said, this is illegal. We're infringing on people's rights. We can't force masks. We can't force shots. We can't do any of this. This is a bad look, and it's, again, highly illegal. But he went along with it. So, again, he's guilty of all of that as well. And then, of course, you have Amy Acton, my apologies, Amy Acton. And again, she was Mike DeWine's female health coordinator and Secretary of Health, or whatever position she formerly held back then. And again, she was all in on mask wearing, shot taking, and she, of course, is running for the Democrat side of particular things here as well. But I wanted to read this article here. This is from Breitbart, and it was titled, Report, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine moves to block state GOP from endorsing Vivek Ramaswamy. Again, we have a problem here. I don't like any of these people running, and I find it beyond disgusting that somebody else can't possibly run. There's a former school board member who is running for Ohio governor under the Republican ticket. No one has heard of this individual. This is a Heather Hill, a former president of the Morgan County School Board. So again, I don't think she stands a chance. That pretty much goes without saying, I think. But anyway, what DeWine is trying to do here is he's trying to block the Ohio Republican Party from endorsing Vivek Ramaswamy. It says DeWine and his advisors hope to prevent the state party from endorsing Ramaswamy to replace DeWine in the governor's mansion in Columbus. President Donald Trump endorsed Ramaswamy on the night he announced his campaign to govern the Buckeye state. It says the move pits DeWine sharply against Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, so said NBC. And then, of course, NBC goes into this giant thing. Ramaswamy, of course, also has the endorsement of a lot of individuals in Ohio, including Senator Bernie Moreno and a number of other individuals, a lot of sheriffs, what have you. I don't think our local sheriff has endorsed him, but either way. A spokesperson basically said that DeWine's not paying attention to this race and he's focused on the budget and whatever else. It goes on here. It says a candidate must garner 2/3 of the state party's 66-member Central Committee's votes to receive an endorsement. It says polling has shown that Ramaswamy is the leader in the Republican Party for the Ohio gubernatorial race. And it says, quote, I know Vivek has a lot of support. He's working the phones. The governor is working them also. A committee member who has heard from DeWine said. However, he has cautioned that the supermajority vote is a pretty high hurdle. One Ramaswamy ally said that the governor and his administration, quote, will be remembered for being wrong on every major Republican fight and for how DeWine has opposed Trump-backed candidates. It says if Trump backs you, DeWine's guaranteed to take the losing side. The establishment isn't just out of touch, it's out of time. And the State Central Committee will prove that again this Friday, an ally remarked. Others were dismayed that DeWine's meddling has not offered a suitable alternative to Ramaswamy ahead of the pivotal meeting. Quote, there's not a unified opposition to the endorsement, the committee member said. It wraps up, it says one potential adversary to Ramaswamy may be Ohio Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel, who promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion while serving as president of Youngstown State University, unquote. Very quick word here about Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel wouldn't win an election if his life depended on it in this state. It'll never happen. He was given the lieutenant governor position. We didn't vote on him to be lieutenant governor. He was just, again, given the job. So that's all that's happened to him, again, ever since showing up, of course, to Ohio State, and then he's been given every other job just because. Again, of course, he was forced to resign as a result of the whole tattoo thing and paying for players and all this other stuff, and yeah, he's dirty. He's always been dirty, and he's spineless as far as Ohio is concerned, and frankly, he's just irrelevant. In fact, he was wrapped up in some of this polling, and it was saying that he was polling in, I think, the low teens or upper single digits. So he's not going to win anything. But either way, that continues to unfold here. There's also this, too. It kind of slides right into education. But this past Tuesday, Ohio voters basically decided whether or not they wanted to tax themselves over the next 10 years even more for so-called infrastructure. And apparently, the vast majority said yes. Not 100% certain as to why. Again, local governments should just be able to handle this without everybody getting taxed. But either way, there were also a lot of school levies throughout Ohio that were on the ballot, and the same thing in Michigan as well, if not all over the United States. As it turns out in Ohio, a great deal of them failed. And what's interesting about the school levies that are failing, and it's a fantastic thing, is they're not failing by a little, they're failing by a lot. You're talking about percentages of 60-30, 65-35, in that general range, which is fantastic. But when a levy is passing, which some of them did, unfortunately, but if they are passing, they tend to be in more urban areas, and those areas are winning by a wider margin. Whereas if the school district that actually gets its levy, those particular levies are passing in predominantly white areas, and they are barely passing. So there is no doubt in my mind, just having, again, looked at some of these general areas from a geographic standpoint, and then, of course, who typically loves to tax themselves. And as luck would have it, again, the individuals that tend to tax themselves into oblivion are those who live in inner city environments. And of course, they're not just taxing themselves, but they're taxing, again, the people around them constantly, even if you're not using the service. Again, there has to come a time when that's illegal, when that does not happen, where you, again, if you're affiliated or if your home is affiliated with a local public school district and you're sending your children, if you want to pay that tax, then pay it. But the people who are not using the service should not be taxed. Again, I fully understand that the entire tax code in our country is completely screwed up, and it doesn't seem to be getting much better, frankly. And certainly Congress isn't voting for it, and they're not helping anything along here. And executive orders, as you know, are only temporary. But when it comes to the business of taxing, again, specifically regarding schools, no one should be taxed or penalized for not using a service. It sounds a lot like Obamacare back in the day. If you don't have health insurance, then we're going to fine you $1,000 or whatever it was. It's completely ridiculous. Again, this should not happen. We fully understand, again, that tax dollars and everybody's tax dollars, regardless of what tax it is, that money goes to things that, of course, we don't use. But even so, in the future, this has to be outlawed. And if this means, again, that schools have to make tough decisions, quote unquote, on what to do because they're not getting enough tax dollars anymore, well, then so be it. But there is a shift, which is an important shift to note here. And the shift, again, has to do with who's waking up to the public school grift. And certainly, again, the tax angle of that grift. And it is a large, large grift, and it always has been. Again, the good thing in Ohio is that more and more people are waking up to this, and it's showing when it comes to school levy votes. So certainly the vast majority of school levies that were on the ballot this past Tuesday in Ohio failed, which is excellent, in my humble opinion. The same was true, as it turns out, in Michigan. Jesse James sent this my way. This was from Megan Reckling. It says, "Well, I'll admit it, I didn't see this one coming. Voters turned down more local school funding proposals last night than we typically see in a May election. Of the 95 school-related questions tracked, it says 27 failed. That's nearly 30%, compared to the usual 18% failure rate." It went on here, it said bonding proposals in particular took a hit, falling well below their usual 69% approval rate. They said this isn't just a blip, it reflects growing frustration from parents and residents who are tired of being asked for more money while Michigan schools continue to decline in academic performance and fail to deliver the education our kids deserve, unquote. No doubt about it. In fact, Dave Bondi put this out, and he was a guest on Jesse James's show last week, which was excellent. Dave Bondi said, "From Birch Run to Midland, voters rejected multi-million-dollar school bonds last night. Despite rising spending, Michigan schools continue to fall short on student achievement." He even shows a chart here that has the percentage of change, and it has, again, throughout the years of 2013 all the way through 2022. And it shows reading and math achievement declining and being actually below zero, if that's even possible, although who's to say. But then it actually has per pupil spending dramatically increasing, certainly from 2014 all the way through 2022. So yes, there is no correlation between increased money and student achievement. There's none. Again, lying is all these people have. It's their only excuse. It's much, again, like individuals who step forward, and Cicely, New Mexico mentioned this to me and showed me this particular post, but I believe it was an Illinois politician, and they were openly talking about how homeschooling threatens the entire establishment, and people need to understand that the people who are filling out any votes or, again, petitions or whatever it is, or even enrolling their own children in homeschooling programs, that some of these individuals are child abusers, and that the individuals advocating for homeschooling are actual child abusers. You've heard me bring this up on the show before, but that's all they have again. I mean, that's it. They have the child abuse angle, they have attacking homeschooling families as their angle, and connecting those two as if those two things are one and the same, which clearly they're not. There's more than enough ample evidence to prove the exact opposite, as a matter of fact, much like this one, actually. This was from Not the Bee, and it was titled, "Come See the Nashville Middle School Teacher Who Doubles as a Drag Queen. Why is this allowed?" It says, "Well, would you look at that? Yet another homeschool your kids ad practically writes itself. This time it's out of Nashville, Tennessee, where middle school teacher Ben Slinkard moonlights as a drag queen on weekends. Here he is, dancing provocatively with a wad of cash in his hand right in front of a visibly uncomfortable child. Disgusting." And then more pictures, even worse. Yuck, it just goes on and on and on. Now, I want to move on to jab stuff, more specifically Donald Trump's pick for U.S. Surgeon General here, which has changed in recent months, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I will say this. There's even an ongoing debate now about his most recent pick, which as of right now is Dr. Casey Means. And this lady, again, dropped out of medical school, if I'm not mistaken. She doesn't have a medical license, but she's pretty much anti-big pharma. Certainly appears to be the case. She did a 2-hour plus interview with her and her brother on Tucker's show a while back. And I would encourage individuals to potentially watch that and certainly listen to her words, because this is an individual, I think, who's waking up. Now, what's interesting regarding, again, the online debate about her is that people are diving into her past and saying, well, she's a big tech globalist, and she used to be anyway, and she was pro-Agenda 2030 and a number of other things. And again, it's possible that that was the case. But what I do know is that over the last 5 years, people have woken up exponentially to numerous issues. And they continue to wake up because, as people know, and certainly the awake fully understand this, that as that happens, and once that happens with one particular subject, you're not done. You're just getting started. And then you start to wake up about the realities of endless other subjects. But I want to read a little bit here and then play some audio from her. This is from the Gateway Pundit, and it was titled, again, "President Trump Announces New Surgeon General Nominee Withdraws Pro-Masking, Pro-Censorship Surgeon General Pick." Now, the person, of course, that everybody blew up on, myself included, was the Dr. Janet Nesheiwat. You may recall that bizarre name. And of course, she immediately came out during the whole COVID line. She was pro-mask, pro-shot, get them all, wear them all, do the whole thing. And everybody said, what in the hell is Trump doing? Well, again, maybe it was, again, hiring these individuals or nominating these individuals to expose them. That's certainly part of the plan, and that is certainly something that's happened here. However, again, this Dr. Casey Means has been on Tucker and said a great deal of very positive things. So anyway, this particular article goes on, and it says she even championed booster shots. This, of course, is the Dr. Nesheiwat, and backed policies like double masking and vaccinating children, citing studies and data from the CDC. It says worse, Nesheiwat was linked to a tragic accident at the age of 13 that resulted in her father's death. At just 13 years old, she accidentally shot and killed her father. And apparently, this was in their Orlando home. Apparently, as the story goes, she was in her father's bedroom, accidentally tipped over a fishing tackle box, causing a loaded .38 caliber handgun to discharge. The bullet struck her sleeping father in the head, and he died the next day. Interesting. Either way, it's tragic, I suppose, but that seems rather fishy. No pun intended there. Anyway, I'll move on. I just think, again, that this Casey Means individual certainly knows a little bit more about what's really going on here. And again, leave it to Laura Loomer to basically dive into anybody's past and basically say, how on earth could that person be credible? Again, Laura Loomer's, living in a glass house. I mean, she shouldn't be mentioning things like this. She's a heavily medicated, pretend Jewish gal. So yeah, I don't know what she's talking about. But anyway, one particular person posted on this and said, I take it that you've never listened to her own words why she dropped out of medical school. She has vowed to destroy the big pharma profit machine that profits off illness. Trump knows what he's doing. Let me just get into some of this audio here from Casey Means. This, again, was when she was sitting on a multi-person panel. And on this panel, she's sitting next to the current FDA head. So anyway, this is about 6 minutes long. Just give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
You would think that the American healthcare system and our government agencies would be clamoring to fix metabolic health and reduce American suffering and costs. But they're not. They are deafeningly silent about metabolic dysfunction and its known causes. It's not an overstatement to say that I learned virtually nothing at Stanford Medical School about the tens of thousands of scientific papers that elucidate these root causes of why American health is plummeting and how environmental factors are causing it. For instance, in medical school, I did not learn that for each additional serving of ultra-processed food we eat, early mortality increases by 18%. This now makes up 67% of the foods our kids are eating. I took 0 nutrition courses in medical school. I didn't learn that 82% of independently funded studies show harm from processed food, while 93% of industry-sponsored studies reflect no harm. In medical school, I didn't learn that 95% of the people who created the recent USDA food guidelines for America had significant conflicts of interest with the food industry. I did not learn that 1 billion pounds of synthetic pesticides are being sprayed on our food every single year. 99% of the farmland in the United States is sprayed with synthetic pesticides, many from China and Germany. And these invisible, tasteless chemicals are strongly linked to autism, ADHD, sex hormone disruption, thyroid disease, sperm dysfunction, Alzheimer's, dementia, birth defects, cancer, obesity, liver dysfunction, female infertility, and more, all by hurting our metabolic health. I did not learn that the 8 billion tons of plastic that have been produced just in the last 100 years, plastic was only invented about 100 years ago, are being broken down into microplastics that are now filling our food, our water, and we are now even inhaling them in our air. And that very recent research from just the past couple of months tells us that now about 0.5% of our brains by weight are now plastic. I didn't learn that there are more than 80,000 toxins that have entered our food, water, air, and homes by industry, many of which are banned in Europe. And they are known to alter our gene expression, alter our microbiome composition and the lining of our gut, and disrupt our hormones. I didn't learn that heavy metals like aluminum and lead are present in our food, our baby formula, personal care products, our soil, and many of the mandated medications like vaccines, and that these metals are neurotoxic and inflammatory. I didn't learn that the average American walks a paltry 3,500 steps per day, even though we know, based on science and top journals, that simply walking 7,000 steps a day slashes by 40 to 60% our risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and obesity. I certainly did not learn that medical error and medications are the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. I didn't learn that just 5 nights of sleep deprivation can induce full-blown prediabetes. I learned nothing about sleep. And we're getting about 20% less sleep on average than we were 100 years ago. I didn't learn that American children are getting less time outdoors now than a maximum security prisoner. And on average, adults spend 93% of their time indoors, even though we know from the science that separation from sunlight destroys our circadian biology, and circadian biology dictates our cellular biology. I didn't learn that professional organizations that we get our practice guideline from, like the American Diabetes Association and American Academy of Pediatrics, have taken tens of millions of dollars from Coke, Cadbury, processed food companies, and vaccine manufacturers like Moderna. I didn't learn that if we address these root causes that all lead to metabolic dysfunction and help patients change their food and lifestyle patterns with united, strong voice, we could reverse the chronic disease crisis in America, save millions of lives and trillions of dollars in healthcare costs per year. Instead, doctors are learning that the body is 100 separate parts, and we learn how to drug, we learn how to cut, and we learn how to bill. I'll close by saying that what we are dealing with here is so much more than a physical health crisis. This is a spiritual crisis. We are choosing death over light. We are choosing death over life. We are choosing darkness over light for people and the planet, which are inextricably linked. We are choosing to erroneously believe that we are separate from nature and that we can continue to poison nature and then outsmart it. Our path out will be a renewed respect for the miracle of life and a renewed respect for nature. We can restore health to Americans rapidly with smart policy and courageous leadership. We need a return to courage. We need a return to common sense and intuition. We need a return to awe for the sheer miraculousness of our lives. We need all hands on deck. Thank you.
Again, it's all good stuff. And here's the thing with Casey Means, Dr. Casey Means. She's been on basically all of these Rumble shows that you can possibly imagine. I mean, she's been on Glenn Beck, she's been on Joe Rogan, she's been on Megyn Kelly, she's been on Bill Maher. You can pick a show she's basically been on it, dropping a lot of these medical facts, which again is fine and dandy. Her job as the U.S. Surgeon General is to make large recommendations. She doesn't make policy, but she does hire people around her. So again, I think in the future it's going to be interesting as to what this means in the long run. However, she's saying all the right things certainly right now. And she sees where the exact movement is actually going. Certainly the quote-unquote medical freedom movement. Well, that medical freedom part has to do with telling the truth. It shouldn't be, again, making money at the expense of human lives. That's the aspect of this that has to be defeated. And fortunately, we have seen this being defeated certainly within the last 5 years plus. But it's certainly happening now, and it's in overdrive, which is great. I think that the confirmation hearing is going to be one to watch. Of course, she won't even make it to the confirmation hearing if she doesn't have the votes. And again, she really hasn't said anything that's different from RFK, which means why would she not get the confirmation hearing, let alone the necessary votes to actually win the actual position? So I don't know. But again, if she actually makes it to the confirmation, it should be one hell of a confirmation to watch, because you can see the Democrats are going to, of course, use her words and all of her interviews against her instantly. She's also going to have copious amounts of support from those on the right. But again, I understand people wanting to nitpick particular things in her past. I would simply just say, again, what is her role? And then again, what does she actually stand for? And based on the audio that you just heard there, it sounds like she's standing for the right thing. She's openly calling out the entire medical industry and openly saying they're teaching the wrong things. This is, of course, 100% true. And this has been the case since its very inception. But here's the cool part again. I think that the left and the right have lost control. And this is a good thing. The establishment members of the right have lost control over, again, the medical narrative, if you want to call it that. And again, plenty of those politicians and even senators like Bill Cassidy and Rand Paul and others. Although I think Rand Paul is on the right side of things when it comes to the medical industry, but some of these other guys aren't. And certainly, again, the ones that have been wrapped up in medicine or injected numerous individuals over the course of time. These individuals have very concerned looks on their faces. And they're concerned because, again, their blackmailers are going to come back around and say, well, you can't support this woman. You know, she's against our own interests and we can't have that. And we're going to lose money and she's going to drive us out of business and whatever else. This is where, again, you're going to be able to expose these individuals, and these individuals rather are going to expose themselves with their own actions because, again, why would they not vote for her? She's trying to root out corruption. She's trying to root out the lies within the medical industry, and certainly she's been saying this and been consistent across the board. In fact, let me play a little more audio from her. This was, again, when her and her brother were on Tucker Carlson's show, gosh, I want to say at least 8 months ago. So give her a listen here for a little while in 3, 2, 1.
Why would we follow the guidelines rather than the outcomes?
It's a great question.
So you just said 5 minutes ago, you were outlining this terrifying and sad and catastrophic series of stats describing the total collapse of public health in the United States. And so who cares what the guidelines are? Doesn't anyone just sort of zoom out for a second and be like, all these kids have diabetes, which leads to dementia. Like this is not working.
Right.
Did no one say that?
Well, the question, it's not working, is the question I would basically put in front of every doctor in America. Like, if you're not looking around you and just scratching your head and saying, what the hell is going on?
Yes.
Then you are profiting off of this crisis, and I want the most dangerous thing you can do in America right now, obviously, is ask the question, why? So, I understand.
About anything.
But, this is just a point to kind of answer your question about why is this happening? Why aren't we following outcomes? It's institutionalized to not actually focus on outcomes because the business model of the healthcare system is volume. It's how many patients can you see, not what their outcomes are. We are paid for volume, not outcomes. Now,
did you see that as a surgeon?
Yeah. So absolutely. It's how many chart notes can you write and bill every day? That's why doctors are seeing 30 to 40 patients a day with 15 different diagnoses for each one. Obviously, you can't help that patient thrive and get healthier. All you can do is write the prescription because we are paid for volume. And the unofficial mantra of
all doctors must know that.
All doctors know. The unofficial mantra of private practice medicine is you eat what you kill, which means you get paid, you eat for how much volume you can do, how many surgeries you can sell, how many people you can get through in and out of your office. Now, back in when Obamacare was coming about, they were, which was really an utter failure, there was lip service that was paid to this idea of value-based care, okay, which sounds great on paper, right? So value is good outcomes over lower cost. This sounds great. We'll get paid more as doctors if we have better outcomes over lower cost. What is the highest value intervention you can do for a patient? Get them to eat healthy. Doesn't cost a lot, has incredible outcomes universally, right? Get them to sleep, get them to exercise. We would have moved towards that. But even that was corrupted by corporate interests because how the doctor had to report on quality was through these metrics called MIPS, basically, merit-based incentive little criteria. And most of them were based on how many of their patients were medicated. So instead of a doctor having to report quality as, I have a patient who got better, who got healthier,
which we expect,
it was how much of the patient population was on long-term medication. So the actual good outcome was defined by medication adherence in a practice rather than is the patient reversed of their disease. Every disease
it wasn't the actual outcome.
It wasn't the outcome. The outcome ended up being how many of the patients took meds. So even with lip service to good outcomes, it's not a healthier cell, it's a medicated patient. Those are two different things. We did not learn that in medical school.
But can I ask you, again, I don't want to get too personal, but what about the doctors that you were trained with or served under, trained you? I'm sure a lot of them are good people. I know all of them are smart. Yes. The things that you're describing would be pretty easy for anyone with an IQ over 80 to notice.
Right.
They not notice this? What is that?
There's several aspects to it. I think that because med school is funded by pharma, when I was at Stanford Medical School, we got a $3 million grant from Pfizer to revise our curriculum and you can look up the articles from this time. It was around 2011. The grant was with no strings attached. They had no control over what the curriculum development was going to be. But, if you're accepting $3 million from Pfizer, of course it's going to have an influence on what we're learning.
And the dean received consulting payments as well.
Actually?
Yeah. The dean during her time, Philip Pizzo, was a pain specialist. Pfizer was one of the largest opioid makers. And he received direct consulting payments from opioid makers. And that year that they received that Pfizer grant, he was appointed, which I was actually involved with. I was working for pharma at the time, to an NIH panel to make opioid guidance with the burgeoning crisis. He selected that panel. How can you have a more prestigious person than the dean of Stanford Med School? 9 out of the 19 people he selected were directly paid for with consulting payments from opioid companies. And that panel in 2011, 2012 recommended more relaxed opioid standards and said that the idea of addictiveness was overblown and led to an increase of the curve in opioid deaths. And, we're talking a lot about the opioid crisis right now. J.D. Vance talking about it, which is just, destroying Appalachia and large parts of America. What people don't, I think, realize is that the majority of opioid overdose deaths started with a legal prescription.
Yes, that's right.
So that's how it works. So I was actually helping.
It's sort of hard to hear that and not, again, one doesn't want to be judgmental. However, that seems like criminal behavior to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end it there. Anybody who calls out conflicts of interest and calls out the establishment from being formally inside the establishment, and then, of course, comes out of it and says, this entire thing is completely corrupt. Look at what's going on over here. Look at what's going on over there. We can't do this. We can't have this. I mean, anybody who does that, I'm a fan of. So again, people can pick apart her past, something that she wrote in the past that somebody disagreed with, something that she said in the past, maybe some other associations that she may have, but you can't call out the establishment like that and expect the establishment to actually support you. Again, I think you're getting a pretty good dose as to why the establishment would go after her, and certainly after her brother, which you heard him also speaking there in that same interview. So I think it's a solid pick, just even at face value. Certainly better than the previous one, the old Dr. Nishwat. That one was a bad pick. That seemed completely out of touch. But this gal right here, again, she's made the rounds, and she's been making the rounds for approximately a year, if not longer than that. Certainly, again, plenty of interviews, and yeah, I think it's legit. So I'm going to go with that right now, unless something else pops up. But either way, it seems good to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cut this one a little bit short. My apologies on that, but have a great weekend, and I will catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.